wish also again to welcome you from the break tea stroke coffee. Every time I would mention tea, someone would remind me others take coffee. So welcome back from the break tea and a coffee at that. And I wish, therefore, now to draw your attention and welcome you to yet another session this morning, where we are going to be privileged now to listen to our keynote speech. It's not my duty to invite the keynote speaker, and before he comes, I will take this opportunity at this juncture to invite our conference convener, Dr. Wilberforce Turiasingura, to do the needful by taking us through the program and as it has been lined up for the other activities. Ladies and gentlemen, can we welcome Dr. Turiasingura Wilberforce?
Thank you, MC. Thank you, MC. The Chairperson of the Governing Council, Director General, the Chairperson of the Central Organizing Committee, the Vice Chairperson of the Central Organizing Committee, members of the Organizing Committee, dear delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity once again to add my voice to welcome you, to all of those that have already welcomed you to this third international conference on governance and service delivery. You are most welcome. The conference has been structured along two models. We shall have plenary sessions and we shall have breakout sessions. All the plenary sessions will take place in this room, and we shall be conducting them in the morning, the first session in the morning up 10:20, and also in the afternoon immediately after lunch. The detailed program handbook will show you how we are going to be organized. The breakout sessions have been organized to take place along the sub-themes of the conference. And we have 10 sub-themes. The first sub-theme is public sector transformation. The second is sustainable development agenda. The third is human resource and performance management. The fourth is e-governance and ICT. The fifth is anti-corruption strategies. The sixth is education, leadership, and management. The seventh is environmental sustainability and climate change. The eighth is peace, security, and stability. The ninth is finance and economic management. And the 10th is operations and supply chain management. Breakout rooms have all been organized in the Jubilee building, 8 of them, and 2 will be in the GDLC, which is a building behind this Jubilee room. Directions have been indicated on the screen, so when you look through the program, you will see your room, and when you go to the building, you will see where they will be organized. The plenary sessions, as I've said, will all take place in this main venue, and we will be having morning sessions and afternoon sessions, except on Thursday, the closing day, where we shall have one plenary session in the morning, and in the afternoon at 1 p.m. we shall converge for the closing ceremony. Today, after the end of the discussions that are all going to take place in this venue, we shall have a networking session. We are free to interact with colleagues, to know each other, and introduce each other delegates, both local and foreign, so that we can make collaborations and partnerships. Tomorrow, after the end of the day, we have organized a cultural gala. The cultural gala will take place in this venue as well. It will be another opportunity for us to interact with our delegates and our friends and our colleagues, and also build further networks and collaborations. On the third day, we shall have a closing ceremony starting at 1 p.m. When you look in your booklet, those who have already received them, starting from page 32, we have a detailed program, minute by minute. When I leave this podium, I will be handing over to the chairperson of the next session, Associate Professor Gambuuze, who will be chairing the keynote speech, and will be giving us the details that will follow thereafter. May I now, at this moment, request the chairperson of this session, Associate Professor Gambuuze, to come and take over from me. Thank you very much.
Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. We are having this session up to 1, where we shall have the keynote speech or statement entitled Transforming Public Sector Governance and Management to Achieve Equitable, Sustainable Development, Refocusing Leadership and Public Service. We shall first have the lecture or the note presented for a maximum of 45 minutes. Then we shall have 2 discussants, each taking a maximum of 15 minutes. And then thereafter, we shall have a question and answer session as time permits. May I request you to give me the attention to introduce to you once again our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Dr. John Mary Kauzia. He's Professor Extraordinary School of Public Leadership, Stellenbosch University. He has just retired from the United Nations, where he served for 22 years. His last posting was Chief of Public Service Innovation Branch, Chief of Public Service Innovation, Branch of the Division of Public Institutions and Digital Government in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs at the New York. Dr. Kauzia has provided expert advice to over 20 countries in Africa, the Balkans, and also in Latin America. His passion is about having Africa's public service leadership into one strategic thinking basket. Please join me to receive Professor John Mary Kauzia to come up here and take his seat. He has not only worked for the UN, but he has also worked in Uganda, previously as a lecturer both at Uganda Management Institute and also at Makerere University. He was also a Deputy Director General at Uganda Management Institute. You're welcome, Dr. John Mary Kauzia. We have 2 discussants. We have Dr. Fred Muhumza and Dr. Zahara Nampeo. But I'll begin with Dr. Zahara Nampeo because I'm not sure whether Dr. Muhumza has arrived yet. Dr. Zahara Nampeo is a senior lecturer of law and acting director of the Human Rights and Peace Center, HURIPEC. Many of you are very familiar with HURIPEC. It has done a lot of studies on human rights in different spaces, in elections, in workplaces, and other spaces. She's also a very distinguished scholar. She has so many publications in that area and very well known for her studies in human rights and peace. Please join me receive Dr. Zahara Nampeo to come and have her seat. Dr. Fred Muhumza, I'll introduce him. He is a senior lecturer at Makerere University, Department of Economics, College of Business and Management. He's also the director of the Economic Forum of Uganda. Dr. Muhumza, if you're here, you're welcome. It appears he's not yet arrived. When he appears, we shall let him take the floor. May I now have the privilege and honor to invite Dr. John Mary Kauzia to make his statement keynote address.
Thank you very much, Professor Karieja. Allow me to say that I observe all protocols and go ahead and present to you this keynote presentation as I was requested. But before I do that, I want to specify two things. One is the way my name is pronounced. I'm called John Mary Kauzia. No, don't apologize. If I was to correct everyone that has not pronounced it that way, I would spend a whole day here. But I just want to make sure that it is like that. The second one, I want to say, really sincerely from the bottom of my heart, how happy I am to be at the Uganda Management Institute. It is an understatement if I say that the Uganda Management Institute has been a home for my formation. In that breath, let me thank everyone at the Uganda Management Institute, through you, Dr. Nkata, for having kept the promise of this institute alive. And I would say that if there is a place in Uganda, and without hesitation with the exposure I have had to East Africa and Africa, in Africa, if there is a place where it is appropriate to discuss transformation, it is the Uganda Management Institute. Trust me, I know what I'm saying, because I was recruited in 1983 in the Uganda Civil Service as an assistant lecturer and deployed at the then Institute of Public Administration. And I knew what it was then. And I see what the UMI is now. And I know what future it is driving to. And it represents the idea I have in my head about transformation. Consequently, I couldn't say no when I was requested to come and give a keynote speech on this topic of transformation. Thank you very much for inviting me. So how will I know that my PowerPoint is on? If you say, okay. What you have on the screen are the focus areas for the presentation I'm going to make, and they may not be necessarily in that order. They just represent areas in which I wish to pass policy messages as we go along. I know that it is a tradition at the Uganda Management Institute, not only academic, but also policy-oriented, so that the ideas we have in the head, the ideas we generate through research, can eventually be translated into policy action. So I will be talking about transformational leadership, but this time in the context of sustainable development, transforming values and principles of good governance for a good society and a good public service, promoting innovation in public sector institutions, promoting equity in the public service, the role of public service, the DNA of effective public servants, and then developing core competencies and mentalities of public servants for equitable service delivery. Let me start by stating what ought to be obvious. Can that be read? I thought so. Which is a disadvantage to you and to me. Me, I can pick it from the paper here, but it seems it's not serving the purpose for which I prepared it by making PowerPoints. So it looks like I may have to pass to the Plan B mode and continue. So I was saying that I want to start with something that should be fairly obvious to most researchers, that everything exists in context, and this conference is being held in a specific context. From my analysis, it is a promising context, but it is also a troubling context. And this is what I wanted to begin with. Since the end of 2019, when the COVID-19 pandemic set in, the world has witnessed a great need for transformation. And we all know that the world has spent so many years since the end of the 1970s engaged in reforms of all sorts. But now we are living in an era of transformation. Governments and leaders need transformation for humanness, agility, adaptability, and resilience. In this context, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals it set forward with the 2063 strategy and its aspiration of being hopeless, of losing the hope that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development had provided. When this pandemic hit, it revealed to everyone the weaknesses that existed in the social, political, economic governance in this world. Now, if you had not found me in the United States, what a nation, you would probably be thinking that I'm talking theory. But I saw a country I took to be great in all its dimensions, as an economic power, as a beacon of democracy. Don't ask me whether I believe that or not, but that's what they always say. As a beacon of democracy, as a beacon of freedom, as a beacon of respect for human rights, I saw that country brought to its knees. And I have to confess that for the first time in my life, I was frightened. I have lived in Uganda through all the bad contexts of Uganda, as you know, all the wars that had been fought in Uganda. None of them had ever managed to frighten me. But the COVID-19 frightened me precisely because I saw it bringing the giant of the world to its knees. By that, it revealed to me the weaknesses of every society in the world. Most of these weaknesses are in areas of social and economic well-being of societies. Many issues that had been taken as weaknesses and risks, they all of a sudden turned into catastrophes. Yes, we knew that there were issues related to aging, but who knew that the aged could all of a sudden start dying en masse, as I saw it happen in my neighborhood in New York. Yes, we knew that there was a struggle for collaboration and partnerships, but we also knew that every country struggles to save its people. But we did not know that this pandemic could reveal the lack of care for the other one, the extent to which self-interest exhibited in nationalism lives in humanity. So the pandemic didn't bring a problem, according, and maybe this is another thing we can. The pandemic did not bring any problem. The pandemic revealed the problems we had. The pandemic revealed the problems we had to accept amidst us, the problems we had refused to address. And now, we have gotten those problems. Science moved. Those who are involved in developing vaccines of all sorts will tell you it takes a long time to develop a vaccine. And if you remember, when COVID-19 hit, that was how long would it take to develop a vaccine that would protect populations against this COVID-19? And the scientists were saying this is going to be hard. It can't happen in a short time. But scientists did it in a very short time, record time, in fact. So record time that people now are wondering whether these vaccines are actually vaccines. Because the protocols you go through to develop a vaccine up to when it becomes accepted were, what can I say? Those who are defending how it happened are saying they were not skipped, they were speeded up. But the point I'm making is that scientists very quickly found vaccines that have protected and saved lives. There is, however, one vaccine that is not yet found. And if we don't find it, remember, this is not the last pandemic. No one can promise that this is not the last pandemic. We will face another. This vaccine lies in the area of social, political, and economic behavior of humanity, especially in the area of governance. If we don't find a vaccine in the area, be prepared for another pandemic, another chaos. It may not happen, but for sure it will come. And therefore, I am by nature an optimist. An optimist. So I'm saying that the opportunities brought by this pandemic, we should not miss them. It sounds callous, to talk over a devastating experience like we have gone through as an opportunity. But I will emphasize it, the opportunities created by this pandemic, not use them. It provided us with a clear view of what is wrong in the governance of societies, and therefore we should be able to work collaboratively and find the vaccines. And this lies in the session that we are going to. Can I have the next slide, if it will not? I'm trying on this slide to say that we are not talking about things in abstract when we are talking about transformation. We are all from different countries. We have got a transformational agenda that was put before us in 2015, in September. It's implemented in 2016. This is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It has got sustainable development goals that cannot be achieved unless the delivery of services, whether it is in health or education, roads, infrastructure, and all this, unless the delivery of services is transformed. The framers of that 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development called it a supremely ambitious and transformational vision. We have got the Africa 2063 agenda with its 7 aspirations. Again, those who framed that development strategy for the whole of Africa, they called it a strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent. Those of you who come from East Africa, from the East African community, I should say, you know that there is the 2050 East African Community Vision. And those who framed that vision, they say that they want to see an East African community transformed into an upper middle income region within a secure and politically united East Africa based on the principles of inclusiveness and accountability. On transformation, on transformed. And since I'm at home, let me say the obvious, that the Uganda 2040 vision is looking forward to having a transformed Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. How many years are we remaining with? Not, but my point I'm making is take the word transformation lightly. If you read the documents of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, they could have used the change. They could have used the reform. They didn't. They used the transformation. The Africans could have used the reform. They didn't. The transformation. The East Africans could have used the reform. They used the transformation. And you becoming suspicious of the word? I became suspicious the moment I read all this. Now, the other thing I would want to guard you against is to think that the Uganda Vision 2040 and the East African Vision and the African Vision, they are copying the global vision. Actually, it is the other way around. Because the African strategy, 2060 strategy, was adopted by heads of state in January in 2015, right? And the global agenda, the Agenda for Sustainable Development, was adopted by global leaders in September, after the Africa strategy. So certainly the Africa strategy could not have been a copy of the global vision. What I'm trying to say here is that transformation, term transformation should be suspicious, and those who are studying governance should study it very seriously and say, how come all leaders now have zeroed in on transformation and not any other word? Can I have the next one? Okay, so that one is talking about shifts in reforms towards transformation. Remember, I told you that it's best to discuss transformation because you are born out of the process of public service reform, you remember? Because I still keep my appointment letter in the civil service. And I know that at that time the IPA was a smaller section. I don't think it was even a department. A smaller section of the Ministry of Public Service in charge of in-service. That's not the UMI you see now. And those who did the public service reform and IPA slightly out of the Ministry of Public Service to make it semi-independent, I don't think they knew exactly what they had pushed when they see the UMI of today. The point I'm making, and I will stress it, is that transformation cannot happen without transformers. Transformation is not just a structural arrangement of getting an institution from this place to the other place. Transformation is a process that can be worked on by people who believe in profound change for betterment. And this is why every time I see all colleagues at UMI and all the support they have in and other sectors, I feel happy and thankful. So Dr. Kata, that one you deserve it. It's not everyone to whom you give a unit, small as the IP as it was, and the same person turns it into the UMI you see now. It hasn't always been like this. So the debate I want to inject in this conference has to do with looking at reform and transformation. If you recall, at the end of the 1970s, there was a lot of talk about public sector reform, mainly driven by international monetary institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. And those reforms were aimed at moving from traditional bureaucratic public administration to adopting what was called then the new public management. And I'm going to use a word that I shouldn't use, but I think it is the most appropriate. The propaganda in support of the new public management was so successful that even university professors actually adopted it. Because it was at that time that I started studying public administration, and they almost convinced me to forget the word bureaucracy and adopt new public management, or to keep on remembering that bureaucracy is a bad word and new public management is a good word. Now I know better. So what this transformation has introduced in this debate, as it is presented on this diagram, is the injection of values beyond efficiency, economy, and effectiveness. Of injecting in that the values of humanness, the values of inclusivity, the values of equity, the values of collaboration and partnerships, the values of integration, the values of leaving no one behind. And it's like the leaders of the world looking to the reality that public administration with no human face is not good for humanity. That we have got to adopt the values and principles of goodness that create a good society. Consequently, we are now being tempted to move from traditional bureaucracies that were putting emphasis on rules, on hierarchy that were inflexible, that were putting emphasis on professionalism, integrity, and ethics, that were promoting the rule of law, to bureaucracies that are based on outcomes and values, which need transformational leadership. Now, the danger in this is that that sounds convincing. And if ever someone is trying to step away, I don't know whether you salesmen, you know, when they are trying to persuade something, before you very quickly buy, step, why is this man insisting on saying it is so good? Is it because of the money the person wants, or is there something else? So this looks so convincing. Move from traditional bureaucracies to value-based governance, right? And I would want to create a doubt in your heads and say, no, we might be dealing with salesmen here. If we have got to promote a good society where there is rule of law, where human rights are respected, where equity is guaranteed, where social justice is guaranteed, then we cannot abandon bureaucracy completely. I'm seeing our colleagues who deal with social matters, law and order, they are among us. Where can this world be if we abandon respect for rules, laws, regulations, constitutions? Where would a society be without that? Except that by nature, society enjoys life when rules are respected. Then we cannot advocate that we abandon bureaucracy, because bureaucracy is a beacon of rule of law. And I want to suggest no, but first of all, let me point out why I thought that analogy is a little bit wrong, a little bit faulty. It's inherently incorrect. I need the next slide. What was inherently incorrect in that move from traditional bureaucracy to bureaucracies based on values? First of all, I have already said, just can't abandon bureaucracy because it is a bureaucracy that ensures, and as you know, the 2030 Agenda for Development, 2016 strategy, and all you found at national level, even at local level, is emphasize rule of law. Everything has got to be done within the context of respect for rules and regulations, due process, justice, professionalism, ethics and integrity, accountability, and all this. You cannot have that unless you have got bureaucratic arrangements that ensures that those rules are respected. So the assumption that we could abandon them was fundamentally wrong. In fact, I would want, since I'm talking to people who teach, please don't teach young people wrong things, because we are in the process of creating the future society. So we cannot put in them, we cannot teach young people that rules and regulations laws and constitutions are wrong, are bad. You can't do that because the consequence is going to be that you have a chaotic society. You will have young people who don't listen to any rules. And yet, we can easily remind them you cannot enjoy a soccer game where the rules of soccer are not respected. You cannot enjoy a basketball game where the rules are not respected. You cannot play tennis and enjoy it if you don't respect the tennis rules. And this, the young ones will accept and know that things get enjoyed when rules and regulations are respected. Yes, you can have bad rules, but those we fight, but not the concept that you have to work in a framework of rules and regulations to enjoy. Now, we have spent a long time teaching the rules and regulations. Remember, in the 1980s, pushing to reform the regulation. Look at the consequence. People have forgotten that when you are working in the public service, the book of rules that you have rules, you have regulations, they are the ones which are guarantee whether you treat people well or you treat them whether you do your job well or badly, whether you get well remunerated or you get badly remunerated. It's the rules and regulations. So what was the point of pushing for the regulations? Someone had misread the thought that we didn't have, that the rules we had were stumbling blocks in our development. That was a misconception. The right thing was, whatever rules we had, whether they were many or few, whether they were good or bad, we didn't have sufficient capacity to enforce them. And in some countries, it is still the same situation. They put up policies, and then they don't enforce them. If I can use a mundane example, really, today in Kampala, I go to a market and they put the things I buy in a Kavera plastic bag. We don't know that they were banned. There was a policy, no? Unless from New York I didn't read it correct. No, but it is just one of those examples where what is wrong isn't the policy, but what is lacking is the capacity to enforce it. So whoever pushed the regulation had a bad conception of the problem, and so he created even a bigger one. By removing regulations, people got room to do funny things, and so you get corruption and lack of ethics and lack of integrity sleeping in the whole process of public service. And now we have to look for a way of removing it, which is not very easy from my point of view. But towards the end of the 1980s, then the pushers of development agenda realized that they had got it wrong. And they started saying, no. Actually, what was wrong wasn't the structures. What was wrong was, and now we need to pay attention to issues, accountability and all that. Where I am coming from, as we discuss reforming the public sector for service delivery. Now, with this, I would propose to the scholars of public administration that we conceptualize the whole relationship between traditional bureaucracies in public administration, new public management, and modern good governance. We conceptualize it differently. Let me have the diagram, the next diagram. It's not coming. That diagram is saying that traditional public administration, new public management, and value-based governance bureaucracies are not mutually exclusive, that you don't need to abandon one in order to do the other. They all need each other. I've already said that the rule-based of traditional bureaucracy is needed for rule of law. And rule of law is a core, it is a governance. So for someone to preach good governance and at the same time preach the removal of public administration, there is a mismatch. Because you can't have a rule of law with weak public administration systems. This is what I propose that you base your research on. How do these interact to make sure that you just don't throw away baby and person as thrown away the valuable things together with unvaluable things. Within that, I want to say that one of the transformations that is most needed now, because we have gone through processes of structuring, structure-based transformation. What we really need now is value-based transformation. If we can inject it in. Can I have the next slide, please? Transforming society and public service with values and principles, and most of these are actually enshrined in the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development. And what I'm proposing is that these values, the values, including transformation itself as a value, the values of integration, leaving no one behind, equity, resilience, inclusiveness, accountability, partnership and collaboration, respect for diversity. Actually, they say respect for diversity. Me, I say harnessing diversity. Security, peace, and justice, effectiveness. These values, if we get them in society and in the public service, they would probably constitute the socio-economic and political vaccine we are looking for before the next pandemic hits. So these values are the ones that are enshrined in the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development. They reflect, can I have the next slide? They reflect the values and principles that are enshrined in the Africa 2063 strategy, together with its aspirations. There you will find the values of people-centeredness, the value of inclusion, values of ethics and accountability, values of good governance, the value of integration, the value of resilience and partnerships, and the value of peace and security. There is no contradiction between the values of the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development and the values of the 2063 Africa Strategy. The only area where you might find, and for Africans you may want to study this, is that the 23rd Agenda for Development puts emphasis on development assistance, that they assist the poor ones to develop. The Africa 2063 strategy puts emphasis on self-reliance. Having been in the United Nations, I can't say the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development was wrong. Being an African, I can't say that the Africa 2063 strategy is wrong. Them are necessary. In fact, I capitalize it this way because I've seen it in practice. Contradiction between self-reliance and help. A strong self-reliant person is that person who has got the assess his or her own strength and know how to use them, but also look around him or herself and assess the opportunities of assistance that he or she can get to supplement his own capacity. That person is practicing self-reliance. So there is no contradiction. Self-reliance does not mean isolation. You don't isolate yourself because you think you are self-reliant. No. If I am self-reliant, I know Dr. Nkata is my friend and he has what to succeed. I go and shake his hand and he gives me what I need to succeed. I'm a self-reliant person. And therefore, the development assistance that is advocated for by the 2030 Sustainable Development, the partnership collaboration that is being advocated for by that global agenda does not in any way contradict the need for African countries to be self-reliant. It only says capacity. See what you have locally, use it for your development. But in case you lack something, look for partners with you so that you get it. But don't look for partners who are going to exploit you. Because remember, partnership is a double-edged value. It can be used to exploit you. In my language, they say, what that means is that if I call you to come and eat with me, be suspicious. Why? Maybe it's because I want what you have, not because I sympathize with your hunger. So the partnerships, yes, but please don't create partnerships that exploit you. Create partnerships where there is mutual assistance. You have what I want, I have what you want. Let's see how we can come together and do it. I think that's the spirit of partnerships that can enhance self-reliance. I'm still on this issue of values. Can I have the next? You see, these documents, these strategy documents, what I have discovered is that people go through the process of, for example, making constitutions, making laws, making policies, making strategies. The process of making them is so laborious, tiring. When they finish, they thank God and keep them. No, that's not what is supposed to happen. Once you have gone through that laborious process, please implement it. If you don't implement it, then it's not a policy. A policy that is not implemented is not a policy. That one I can swear it on any document you want. So, the values I have just pointed out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and in the 2063 strategy, someone might say, but okay, do these exist in Uganda? Yes, they do. Because I have read the Constitution of Uganda, and I have read all the legislations for fighting corruption in the country, and I have picked out all the values that are specified. But who actually knows? Who has bothered to do that and say that the Constitution is not a Constitution if the people who are concerned with this Constitution don't know it? Don't know the value the Constitution is advocating for. Don't know what these values mean in our daily practical life. So I just analyzed the documents and to the values and principles that are enshrined in Uganda's constitution and anti-corruption legislation. What happened to that? If I was still a lecturer, teach laws, read constitutions, and pick out, and then with how to inculcate this in society, how to inculcate these values in this. They can't be created unless people, first of all, are exposed to them. And these documents are very long. You have to sympathize. You're not going to get a peasant who is going to read the documents and pick out these. There has to be a process of picking them out and then in a simplified way, making sure that, by the way, Uganda emphasizes these values, and we really need to struggle and put them in our system. You see, my of law, things of justice, things of constitutionalism are important to be left to lawyers. Lawyers are also to succeed. These put in place, these constitutions we make. You can't just wait that when my constitution is a lawyer me. You know the constitution I'm talking about. In many cases, no. there has to be a extracting from well thought of these values and injecting them and inculcating them in society. I want to zero in on the value of equity. Can you put this slide? Yes. Of course, equity is not complete unless you see it in all dimensions. And now they always talk about 4 dimensions: economic equity, social equity, ecological equity, which has to do with the way you use the environment, and then the intergenerational equity, which has to do with the of what we do today, meaning of future. So I'm on these 4. Because my analysis has been that we live in a fundamental thing, which is political equity. Because decisions that concern economic equity, social equity, ecological equity, intergenerational equity are in the political arena. That's why you need to zero in on political equity. If there is no political equity, you're not going to have the other ones either. Because who makes the decisions that concern economic equity? Who makes the decisions that concern intergenerational equity? Who makes the decisions that concern social equity? Who makes the decisions that concern ecological equity? If it is only one person or just a small group of people, then that is lack of political equity, and consequently, the decisions that are made most likely are going to be faulty in the 4 areas. So those of you who are doing research and only 4, we have got to think beyond what exists. Because right now, if we the world, we have to go beyond. Use what exists to open our eyes to the things that had not been seen before us. And I want to inject in the debate on equity this issue of political equity. The more people you involve in the decisions, the more likely you are to arrive at good ecological equity, economic equity, social equity, and all these other things. You go wrong on politics, you will go wrong on the others, most likely. But as I say, I'm introducing a debate, so probably I could be in that case. Now, transformation is not going to happen unless there are new ways of doing things. This is what brings us to the issue of promoting innovations in public sector institutions. Can I have that slide that is talking about promoting innovation in public sector institutions? Now, by way of introduction, let me say, for the 22 years I have spent in the United Nations, I was in charge of the United Nations Public Service Awards program. And that United Nations Public Service Awards program, probably some of you or most of you know it, is a program through which the United Nations promotes innovations in public sector institutions. So what I'm saying is from this. First, we really need to promote innovations in public sector institutions if we have to continue the hope of pushing for transformation. Now, I know that traditionally people think that public sector institutions at the public service, they don't innovate. Yeah, again, we inherited it from the things we learned in universities. Bureaucracies are not innovative, they are wasteful, they have inertia, nothing moves. Can I propose to you that my experience of 22 years has proved all that wrong? Actually, public sector institutions innovate, and innovate seriously, all the time. Public servants, especially in poor countries, are constantly in search of how they can perform better and serve the public, even in conditions where they have no means. And if you look at the experience with the COVID-19 pandemic, you will agree. Public servants died on duty. They didn't have to, because they took it that they had to find a way of saving. So if you start by believing that public service does not innovate, then you innovations. you have to go to starting sign. Public service actually innovates. What we are looking for is how to innovate. Poor countries innovate. There is also a stigma around that. People think that poor countries don't innovate. That also is not true. There are lots of innovations that are going on in poor countries. And some of the innovations that are adopted by developed countries actually are engineered by poor countries. But then they don't have the means to implement them, so the ones who have the means to implement them, they pick them. And you know the Kenya M-Pesa? The thing started from here. And now it is becoming a global phenomenon of dealing with. People have forgotten from here in Kenya. So poor countries innovate. You cannot promote innovation. What happened to the flag? I've been looking out for the flag, I didn't see it. Yeah. You cannot pushing for innovation if you have got a mindset that says poor countries innovate, public service can't innovate. That mindset will already be a stumbling block in your push for innovation. But for all this to happen, we fundamentally need transformational leadership in public sector institutions, in private sector institutions, in NGOs, in civil society, need transformational leadership. Can I have the next slide? No, that's the one I finished. It says transformational leadership in the context of the 2030 agenda. Okay. Now, I know I'm talking to professors, I'm talking to academicians, I'm talking to researchers, you have read management books, and they talk a lot about transformational leadership. What I'm talking about is slightly different, because I'm talking about transformational leadership in the context of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. In other words, I am answering the question, if one has to be a transformational leader, what do we need to do? As you had Professor Karieja introducing me, said I have been advising many countries, yes. And one of the questions I'm always asked by these leaders, what do we do? We have been doing our best. What do we do in order to be transformational leaders? I've developed a transformational leadership model that is around the word transformation itself. It has got 10 priority areas, which I think in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, if one has got to be a transformational leader, one has to do the 10. Not one of them, all of them. And it is around the word leadership. We need to leverage community potential. The belief people don't develop themselves is the role of leaders is to energize, is to mobilize, is to organize, is to look for resources. But we need to bear in mind that countries are developed by their people, not leaders. Leaders are very few. People who develop themselves. In fact, there is a quote of the late Julius Nyerere who said, the poor, you cannot develop the poor, people must develop them. It was true then, it is still true today. To find a way of leveraging its potential themselves. Not promising them that to them. You can't. It's not possible. One person to deliver development to a whole country. Develop themselves. Maybe to engage all actors, development to go to national and regional level. You have to ensure mobilization and frugal utilization of resources. You have to rely on local capability, they said. You have to always evaluate and state achievements and shortfalls. You use those to harness an ideology that is at the center of policies, and we have to instill values of professionalism, transparency, accountability, integrity, and ethical conduct. I think it will be obvious if I say that lack of accountability, lack of ethics, lack of integrity has squandered the resources of public sector institutions in many countries. I don't want to say in Africa because I know that this thing is a global problem. The last P is you have to pursue a vision for the future generations that is constructed on what you have so far achieved. You know that leadership is tomorrow. Has no vision for tomorrow. What are you doing today? You know, the biblical prayer that give us our daily bread, that's not a transformational prayer. No, we can give you your daily bread, but that's how you will live. You will not change until you go to heaven, assuming you will get there. But if you want transformation, you must work for more than the daily bread. You must envision better things than daily bread. Can I have the next one? I'm trying to conclude the next slide. Okay. It starts with which you can succeed without an effective public service. Because someone has got to play the role of the public service and public servants that I have pointed out. Development, policy and strategy planning, service delivery, we are already talking about that, development, community resource utilization, monitoring development policies and strategies, and institutional and human capacity development. Remove any of these, the whole issue of development and transformation is jeopardized. And who is supposed to be this, to do this? Public servants. So what I have never understood is why some governments do not realize that the word government literally means public service. That's why they create ministries, that's why they create departments, that's why they create sections, that's why they create decentralized entities. The whole issue has to do with public service. So why do you quarrel with the public service when you know it is the instrument that ensures the success of government? Whether you are talking of security, whether you are talking of health, education, infrastructure, communication, justice. Can you do any of those without an effective public service? No. So there shouldn't be any stone left unturned in search for transforming the public service into an effective instrument of state action, because that's what it is supposed to be. You don't send a farmer into a garden with no hoe. Okay, maybe if he's going to weed, it might weed without a hoe, but if it is digging, he needs the hoe. Now, if we accept that principle, that you can't succeed without the public service, then what should public servants look like? Can I have the next one? Yes, that's the DNA of the public servant. Because probably you are all, like UMI is, involved in training public servants. I can start by stating what is disappointing in the whole process of training public servants. Because we pass them to public servants' knowledge and skills. And I'm saying that's a small piece of what a public servant needs in order to be effective. First and foremost, if you look at the center of that diagram, you see it is humanness and empathy. In fact, the title of that slide is Bound to Humanness and Empathy, the DNA of a public servant. In other words, if you don't have humanness and empathy, that love for human beings, that love for serving people, then the rest of the outside is useless. You may have the best knowledge, you may have the best skill, you may have the best skill in technology and whatever, you may be the best doctor, the best nurse in terms of knowledge, but if you don't have that humanness that pushes you to serve humanity for its survival, you cannot be an effective public servant. I take this almost religiously. You have got to love the survival of humanity in order to be a good public servant. Then after that, we can add on your skills, we can add on your knowledge, we can give you the instruments that you need to do that job. You know, it's like training an accountant who is by nature a thief. What have you done? You have just equipped him to take all the money because he knows how it works. If he didn't know how it works, he would do it in a clumsy way, then you catch him. But if he's an accountant or a very good auditor, well skilled, you will never catch him if he's fundamentally a thief. So this is why I'm saying you need to study the DNA of a public servant and then know how to develop the right DNA. If you know this person is by nature thief, don't appoint him. Don't make him a cashier. Maybe you can look for a job where there is nothing to steal, then he can work. But don't make him a cashier. So humility, creativity, technology know-how, the skills, persistence, adaptability, trust and credibility, responsibility, collaborative leadership, all this is very important for the effectiveness of a public servant, but it is zero if that public servant has no humanness and empathy, that love for human beings. I want to conclude by engaging in a debate with the former president of USA, President Obama. You know, he challenged African leaders. And that challenge is still on, but I prefer that we discuss it before we take it verbatim. He said that Africa needs strong institutions and it does not need strong men. I guess by that he meant women also. Now, on first sight, you notice that that's a very appealing statement, right? But then I have gone through it and I have concluded that it is misleading. It was romantic from a political point of view, but in the condition of African countries and many developing countries, it is a misleading statement. Misleading, you know, first, institutions don't descend from heaven. Institutions are created by men and women. And it will take strong men and strong women to create strong institutions. So you cannot say you need strong institutions and not strong men. Even at that level, it's not a very correct statement. Secondly, I think it is a misunderstanding of the word strong men, that term. I know that it has existed in the balance in Africa, in many countries when they say strong man. If they say strong man, I start suspecting you. Say, well, what do they mean when they call this person a strong man? Because most of the strong men we have seen in Africa have been bad men also. Does strength mean badness? I think we need to get a proper definition of what it is that constitutes a strong man, what it is that constitutes a strong woman. We should not follow the media when it is talking about people who are brutalizing their societies as strong men and strong women. Those are weak people. You know, if you are a man and you really think you're a strong man, do you go home and beat your wife? And then I call you strong? No, you are very weak. As a man, you are really very weak. You must even be having a problem in your head. So the so-called strong men we have been seeing are not the proper definition of strength. The proper definition of strength, really, it lies in two things. You are strong if you are trusted by your people. I will call you a strong woman and a strong person. You are strong if the achievements of your work benefit the people you serve. I will call you a strong man and a strong woman. You are strong if you have got the ability to resist the temptation of stealing public money. I will call you a strong person. That's because you know that it takes courage to look at money when you are hungry and then not take it. Now, if you can look at money when you are hungry and then not take it, then I say this is a strong person. One of the problems that we have been facing in terms of this issue on strength is that in Africa we have had strong people who marshaled sufficient power and removed bad governments and then put in good laws, but they didn't have sufficient strength to subject themselves to the control of the same laws. Then you are weak. If you are strong and you put in place strong laws, then you should be strong enough to subject yourself to the control of those laws. With due respect, you remember the late Mugabe, the late president of Zimbabwe? He got to the point of talking about the Constitution as a piece of paper. You cannot be strong if you take a law that you drafted to guide the entire society that you lead and you call it just a mere piece of paper, meaning you cannot subject yourself to its control. So why did you put it in place in the first instance? So Obama talked in a very provocative way because he was talking to African leaders. But when you analyze it in a conference like this, because here we have the liberty to analyze, you realize that he almost misled the entire continent. We know we need strong men and strong women, but not in the sense he meant it. We certainly need them, and we cannot have strong institutions without strong men, because institutions don't create themselves. They don't nurture themselves, and they don't kill themselves. Institutions are created by men and women, they are nurtured by men and women, and they are killed by men and women. So we need strong men and strong women who can create strong institutions, nurture them, and protect them, and defend them, and mobilize the people to make sure that these institutions guide the society. And when I say institutions, I include the public service also. I have already emphasized how important it is. I take it as a privilege to have been given this opportunity to talk to you. And I would like to profoundly express my thanks to Dr. Nkata and your team in UMI for having invited me to share with you these words. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Professor Kauzia for your thought-provoking and very inspiring keynote address. He reminded me, Philip Selznick, that leaders of institutions are those that can define, promote, and protect the values of their institutions. And of course, he reminded us, those who study policy, that government is not what it says it does, it's not what it documents it does, but it is actually what it does or does not do, and the difference it makes. He is a public administrator and a public administrationist. There are not so many public administrators who become public administrationists. The godfather of that being Woodrow Wilson. He says that legal issues are so important that we shouldn't leave them only to lawyers. And he was in the defense of the bureaucracy, in defense of a value-laden bureaucracy, debunking the myth of new public management, but also taking us back to the idea that me and you created the state because there is that which we cannot provide for ourselves, either individually or collectively. And that is the essence of the public service. Thank you so much, Dr. Kauzia. We have very eminent scholars who are going to discuss this presentation. It was deliberate that it is from another perspective. A legal scholar and an economist. Dr. Zahara Nampeo, please come and share your thoughts on this keynote address. Please welcome
I seek your indulgence to allow me to join the protocol already presented here. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Uganda Management Institute, for organizing this international conference on governance and service delivery in developing economies, very timely. And thank you too to Professor John Mary Kayuzia for the keynote that has kick-started off this conversation, the theme of which is transforming public sector governance and management to achieve equitable, sustainable development. And it focuses on some themes, refocusing leadership and public service. It is humbling to speak after you, Professor Kayuzia. I pride myself in being a professional student, meaning that I never stop learning. I'm coming from the legal background, and my pen didn't stop writing the whole time that you were talking. I will attempt to bite at what you have said, and as we are talking about transforming public sector governance and management, two things stand out for me: equitable, sustainable development, and the key word there is equitable, and refocusing leadership. I know that, Professor, you emphasized transformation, and as the session chair has emphasized, you talked a lot about the need to observe compliance for laws, policies, and rules. But I think for me, as we are talking about transformation, I want to key in on the issue of sustainable development, equitable sustainable development, and refocusing leadership to help us to understand your discussion. And allow me to zoom in on the context in Uganda, which I'm most familiar with. I know that we have visitors from outside here. But let me focus on the Uganda situation to help me elaborate my discussion of your paper. Now, if we are looking at Uganda's development targets, of course, which we all aspire to as public servants, the budget for this year's, the financial year 2022-2023, was themed full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, so that caters for us as public servants, digital transformation, and market access. And of course, to remind ourselves, because we are within a community, This theme is in line with that of the East African community, which is to accelerate economic recovery and enhance productive sectors for improved livelihood. And how does the government of Uganda aim to do this? One, by kick-starting the process of getting households that are still based in subsistence into the money economy, to support businesses and the overall economy to recover from the COVID and to restore lost jobs and livelihoods, and thirdly, to protect households from the rising prices of food, fuel, and other essential commodities. Now, all of this revolves around public sector management and governance. How do we do our work to ensure that the government will be able to deliver? However, as we are talking service delivery, we are dealing with issues such as increase in commodity prices. That is the cry every day. Soap, petrol, cooking oil, cement, steel have all experienced price increases. And what does this result into? Overall inflation. And I believe I'm speaking not only for Uganda, but many countries beyond our borders. So, of course, what this does is to cause considerable discomfort among the public. So what we are seeing, we have very beautiful development targets, but there's an uphill task for us as leaders, as persons working in public service to deliver. So what we need to do is to have an interconnectedness of all the little pieces. And that is why I go back to equitable, sustainable development and refocusing of leadership as my areas of focus. Professor Kayuza talked about the issue of leadership. He called them the transformers, the actors, the leaders who believe in profound change. Of course, part of leadership requires doing these things that we do every day, monitoring government programs. The recent catchword is the parish development model in Uganda, which is intended to create wealth. It's important that we continue as public servants, public service, people working in the public service, to monitor such initiatives. And the professor also emphasized the issue of accountability and proper public sector governance. But for me, coming from the legal fraternity, what is important is to have an interconnectedness, to be thinking cross-cutting, underlying and determining factors that will affect sustainable development. And this calls for a certain form of leadership and public service. For example, as we're talking about these targets, the World Bank has told us that Uganda's population is targeted to reach 63.8. Right now we are at about 44-something million. We are targeted to reach 63.8 million by 2030 and 105 million by 2050. And yet we're talking about agriculture, industrialization. Agriculture, for instance, which is expected to feed this population in 2050, over 105 million, is still subject to the volatile weather variability of our country. If us as persons working in public sector, if our experts and leaders know, as I'm sure they do, that the agricultural sector plays a critical role in Uganda's food security and economic prosperity, and that it employs 70% of the population, why then don't we have that leadership and that thought? Professor Kayuza talked about leadership for tomorrow. Why must we continue to depend significantly on the rains, considering the alarming changing weather patterns from climate change? He also talked about the issue of equity, humanness, and empathy in public service. Why, for instance, if we wake up every day, every morning, for 2020 and 2021 and 2022. Why are we not able to predict the almost inevitable annual hunger issue in Karamoja? And we treat it as an emergency year after year. Are we doing our work as the public service? Isn't it predictable enough for us to understand the weather patterns and plan accordingly? We have seen the continuous mudslides, the flooding, and these have become more frequent. So this calls for a form of leadership that is holistic, approaching issues from an integrated and all-rounded angle with the ability for foresight and long-term planning. And when we are doing this interconnectedness of planning and management, we also need to fall back on the values that he has very ably spelled out, the values of humanness, collaboration, the values of goodness, equity, and social justice. Of course, I recognize that the COVID brought with it its own challenges. It kicked us back many years, but it also revealed to us who we are as a community. Are we a caring community? Do we care enough? It revealed to us how crisis caused the rifts between the haves and the have-nots, the inequalities, for example, in education and in healthcare. Moving forward, there are things that we need to take cognizance of as we refocus on our public service delivery, as well as on the leadership that we need to provide. And one of these is to rebuild systems to minimize losses and leakages and to enhance honesty within public sector governance and management. And I don't want to overemphasize this because our professor has touched on it, the issue of corruption, the need to minimize these leakages and enhance honesty. What I want to focus on a little bit more, which he has also touched on, is the issue of honesty. Dr. Jimmy Spire Sentongo, some of you may know him. He's a cartoonist. He's also a scholar from Mackay University. He recently wrote a piece on September 28, 2022, about the high cost of Uganda's breakdown in honesty, which has not spared the public service. Schools, government offices, everywhere, everyone appears to be scheming to cheat or take advantage of the other. That we have generated into a cultural construction where honesty is punished with inconvenience, with sabotage, with frustration, with exclusion. If you attempt to be the honest one, the system uproots you and punishes you. Does the government of Uganda, do our governments where we come from, trust our citizens? Do our citizens trust our public service? Do our citizens trust their government? And of course, how does this influence public service management? And what does it say about leadership? What is society without trust? For me, I believe we need to go back to that point. What can we achieve without trust in the first place? Can public service, no matter how transformed, can it run under mutual suspicion, where everybody is hiding from the other because we don't know what they are holding under their desks? This question of trust was raised by the Uganda National Academy of Science, the UNAS 2021 report. The report was entitled Trust in Our Nation, Building Effective Governance and Partnership Systems for Uganda's Development. And according to this report, so these are not my words, this is a research finding. According to this 2021 report, the centrality of trust to the well-being and prosperity of societies is core. And the country can only have an opportunity to chart out our path to development, to wellness, to goodness, when we trust each other. We need to formulate strategies and policies in a genuinely inclusive manner and to execute agreed upon actions together. By agreed upon, are we consulting enough? Are we involving all those that we are planning for? The report mentions that there is a long legacy of broken promises. broken promises of the government to its people, the social contract that persons have come to no longer expect from their government. That's the attempt to cheat. We went to do a research as the Human Rights and Peace Center. Why there is more compliance when people put their private funds together in circles and they pay back. But when the government comes up with an initiative, Youth Livelihood Fund, they say that one you can steal is for government. Why? So the report mentions that there is a long legacy of broken promises and the easy resort to violence. It asserts that all those concerned, those receiving public services, those giving them, must affirm each other's ability to contribute to and sustain our development, and therefore then, only then, can we reinforce confidence in our nation. So I just want to emphasize that as we are talking about transforming and refocusing leadership, we need to also go back to building trust. That's a core component. Of course, we are not leaving matters of law to lawyers. So we all need to be involved in the laws and rules. Let me remind us the need to always fall back to international, legal, regional, national jurisprudence as we are talking about equitable, sustainable development and refocusing of leadership. Because as the professor very ably told us, many of the weaknesses that we are seeing that are affecting our people are mostly in the economic, social, service sphere where public sector is greatly involved. Much of public service delivery requires application of resources, technical, financial, and human. But of course, as we know, and we are talking about this theme, developing countries, we don't always have sufficient resources at our disposal all the time. However, the laws, the rules tell us that even when we are doing public sector governance and management, there must be some guiding principles that we are following in order for us to say that we have effective public service. That there must be progressive realization of rights of services through service provision. And the guidance says that this necessitates the government, civil service, public service, whether central, local government, public institution, public hospital, whichever entity it may be, is required to do at least these three concrete things to implement our obligations progressively and for us to achieve transformation of public sector management and governance. One, that we must take specific steps and we cannot do nothing. And I think this speaks to the issue that he talked about, innovativeness in public service. You can't sit back and say, I don't have the resources to do this. Let me wait for government to allocate, and then I'll go out and talk to people. So we cannot afford to do nothing. We have to take some specific steps, meaning that there is at least a minimum threshold, a minimum core content of things that we need to do in order for us to start on our journey of effectiveness. Secondly, the steps must be expeditious and effective. There must be something that is visible, that is easy to see, that you can talk about and convince the citizens so that they do not continually lose trust in you as the service deliverers. Thirdly, the steps must be deliberate, concrete, and targeted. Deliberate, concrete, and targeted as clearly as possible. Only then shall we say that we have an effective public service, one that attempts to take steps within our minimal resources. That is the guidance that is provided by international human rights law. Of course, the other thing that I would like to emphasize as we are doing public service management and governance is that retrogression is not acceptable. Going back to the standards that are lower, the levels that are lower than we were before, is something that is not acceptable as per the law. So where we are today should be better than we were in 2020, in 2014. Only then can we say that we are being effective. We cannot say that this year resources are not enough, so we have to go back. So retrogression is something that is not acceptable in international law. Of course, the other principle that I would like to emphasize is the principle of non-discrimination. This is key, you know, with focus on groups that are most vulnerable. I mentioned Karamoja, but there are so many other groups that are important, that are vulnerable. And of course, as we are talking about, you know, the sustainable development goals, the fact that we shouldn't leave anybody behind, it is important for us within the public service to always say, how do we ensure that everybody is working at the same level? So I do not want to claim that I can even touch a quarter of what the professor has said, but please, Professor, allow me to build a brick on that by making this presentation, and I hope that I've been able to bite a little bit on what you have very ably discussed. I thank you once again, Professor Kayuzia, for the keynote, and I thank you also, members, for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Dr. Zahara Nampeo, for you didn't bite a little. It was a big bite, but full of brevity and conciseness. So we have enough time to digest it, and you are giving perspective to this conference. In the spirit of honesty, it's 1 o'clock now, but I want to beg your indulgence that you bear with us at least another maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes by Dr. Fred Muhumuza, and maybe another 5 to 10 minutes for the plenary to raise issues as we go for lunch. Dr. Muhumuza was earlier presented, but let me present him back to you since he's now here. Dr. Fred Muhumuza is a senior lecturer of economics at Makerere University. He is also a public intellectual, and if our sister Liz had listened to some of his views post-COVID, no subsidies, frugality, and taxation, don't tamper with taxation at this time, maybe she would have not made history as the shortest Prime Minister of Britain. Please welcome Dr. Fred Muhumuza to come and make his remarks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Allow me to recognize the protocol and to appreciate Professor Kayuzia for a very inspiring conversation. I really have no intention to stand in between you and your lunch, my lunch as well. Hope I have a copy. But to really say, as an intellectual, I'm more of a practitioner. I believe in what I refer to as a teaching hospital. You teach as you treat. So if economics can't find its way in the public spaces, that's not the economics I learned and believe in. And thank you, Prof. The message I carry really is civil servants having humaneness and empathy. And it's really very sad sometimes to find that UMI, which began as part of the civil service, walked off. I'm trying to see how does it walk back.
No retrogression.
That is law. The practice, sometimes we say, okay, you serve the law, what is practically possible to do? And one of my first assignments at the Ministry of Finance was to review something that was called the Public Service Enhancement Project, which was a World Bank loan of $75 million. I reviewed it and discovered that $15 million, it was clear what it was going to do. The 60, they were saying as and when needs arise. I say that's not economics. I'm not going to borrow for unforeseen circumstances. So I cancelled the project and reduced it to $15 million. And I was bashed. How dare you? I said, yes, that is me from the academia coming to the practice. Welcome to my world as I'm welcome to your world. The matter went all the way to the president. Thank God the president agreed with us, said, actually, leave out the 60. We went to Washington, renegotiated the loan. But the president said one thing, please add back 8 million, I need a civil service college. My view was the civil service college should come back to UMI to do what they were supposed to do for the civil service. You are clapping and the money came. When I finally came to check where the civil service college was in UMI, there was a small building down there with a small label, civil service college. Then somebody took the money, went and bought some swamp somewhere in Ginger and built it there. What happened to UMI and civil service? Until we bring that back, empathy and humaneness is still a challenge in the civil service. And that for us is a challenge. You can actually be genuinely doing the wrong thing. Sustainability. I have another issue with many policies. Me, I am here to bring the practice of where I really want the civil service to refocus. Empathy and humaneness. People are saying sustainability, we need to preserve the environment. So this country, this year of post-COVID, actually COVID is continuous, and then Ebola found us here, is implementing a project of distributing 1 million gas cylinders, I don't know to who. I have very many vulnerable people who are cutting trees every day, and this project is not speaking to them. But we want to sustain the environment, so we must go LPG gas. Who are you talking to? Thank you, Prof, for bringing back the involvement of the people to participate in decision making. Whoever designed that decision, I don't think, really knew what are the challenges we are facing. This is not the need of the hour. 1 million gas cylinders, to who? Now we're even connecting households. Whoever is within a pole should be connected freely. When I built my house, that power line found me there. I had no intention of connecting to Meme because I can't afford. Now government wants to connect those individuals. And you are saying Uganda has very good policies, only that does not implement them. Thank you, Prof, for the indictment. Any policy that is not implemented, we have no authority to attach the word good to it. On what criteria? Let's be academic, intellectual, and practical. What is the justification? Now here we are. Ebola is with us. The president was reading the other day and putting Mubende and the lockdown. And he said, we are going to withdraw ambulances from elsewhere to concentrate them here. This for me is the need of the hour. This country has no ambulances. And we are distributing gas cylinders. So where are what is our public service doing to us? If we are going to do sustainable development, this conversation really needs to be carried forward. What kind of civil service do we have? How do we reorient it? How do we reconfigure ourselves to humaneness and empathy? That's a message for me really to carry along. How do we build the resources and utilize the limited resources for sustainability, addressing the very critical needs of our community, the very critical needs of society, so that we can be sustainable in the future? What vulnerabilities do we have today? How do we address them? The partnerships, he has really mentioned the issue of partnerships, and as an economist, I'm looking at the dangers that are emerging out of the new partnership arrangements. We have Europe reconfiguring. We have the major funders of our HIV/AIDS program saying we are scaling down and out. How do you reconfigure new partnerships? We still have the targets, 2030. But after the war of Ukraine and Russia and the energy crisis there, people are saying, hey, climate change, please, those targets should wait. We need to first exist. That's being pragmatic. It's not that they are losing focus, but they are saying the needs and dimensions have changed, and the word is innovation. I must innovate new ways of survival, because a human being must first survive, both now and in the future. So how do we create new partnerships that are emerging? Non-aligned, we are being told now you are either here, if you are not here, you are with them. You cannot tell me you are non-aligned. You have seen these votes at the UN. You abstain, you are questioned. Why did you abstain? You're supposed to have either said no or yes. Abstention is non-aligned. I don't want to hear. Those are the new partnerships. Where is Uganda going to find its space? We need to innovate. We need to be creative. We need to look at the strategic risks going forward because the world is reconfiguring. The new Prime Minister of the UK has said, no, the problem is not even Russia. I'm looking at a bigger challenge. It's China. China is a major lender here in our programs. Right now, I'm not seeing China on my radar of donors and lenders anymore. So how am I going to survive? There are certain projects that were leveraging that. So the new creative ideas need to come back. And creativity can only come from a committed, dedicated, skilled civil service that is underlined by empathy and humaneness. That, for me, is a carry-on message. How do we bring that? That even as you sit, you want to get that car that takes you to tour inland travel. Who are you going to check on? Is that their true need? One day I was really annoyed, and as I want to close, really, I can talk forever. I'm in a lift, and a young girl is telling her friend who was in the lift, we're going up, said, you missed last week. Said, what happened? We went to the field, so you missed the allowances. So field travel in Uganda is about allowances, not to check on what the citizens need. And it's a big component of the government budget. So when we cut some of these budgets, we know what we are doing. We will annoy you, and we always annoy you. Non-wage recurrent is not about delivering the service the community needs. It is allowances. And then when they come back, you ask them, where is the field report? We shall produce it, and 2 years later you can't find it. It was about allowances. UMI. Please, the civil service needs to get back to you, and you get back to it. Going forward, I want to see that interaction because it's very, very critical for us to deliver the sustainable development for our population, for our country that is inclusive, decisions that will be professionally informed, and following intellectual debates, but geared towards that citizen out there. The special civil service DNA needs to be recreated. I chat with a friend of mine who is an Indian, and I'm concluding talking about governance. I sit on governance of a number of institutions, and one of these institutions has a friend of mine who is an Indian, and he wanted to bring his son here to study in our university. He had one concern, not about the quality of our universities, but he said if he studies here, then he would never join the civil service in India. Because they have special courses for civil servants. Can UMI create special courses that, like lawyers do, you don't just practice if you don't have an LDC certificate? This is the point Professor has raised. If you are going to train a thief and give them accounting skills, you know where you're going to end up. So while there are so many accountants and we're looking for accountants in government, can we have those who, in addition, have done courses that prepare them to come and work in the civil service? I thank you.
I know you are not that hungry, so you can have another. As a teacher, I just want to give a working definition. Public service. The ability to provide opportunities for the well-being of each and every citizen. And that's what this conference is all about. How can we innovatively and through partnerships improve the well-being of each and every one? So I will request my panelists to remain seated. The same with the keynote speaker. I know you've been taking notes. You've been provoked. Questions and comments. Please be brief, introduce yourself, and maybe where you are coming from, and precisely pass on your comment. And if possible, you can as well indicate whom you would prefer to respond. I suggest that you express your intention by show of hands. Right Honorable Ziwa, followed by Commissioner Seremba, Dr. Niwagaba, and then Dr. Galukande, and then we shall have another round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, our facilitators. It has been a very important and good expose. Where policies have gone wrong, for instance, the deregulation, I would add decentralization, where really everybody is saying public sector expenditure is growing by day, and we have so many local governments and still continuing. And at what point may we say, let's reverse this wrong policy? And I'm looking at it from the perspective of Dr. saying retrogression should not happen. And in many instances, many of our policies have gone wrong. I was joking with the DG here and telling him maybe at this moment, before the implementation of the parish development model, we need to start assessing and evaluating it now. Because you've already said, as you are giving out the money for circles, Nigina, out of ourselves, is properly utilized and accounted for. The one for the youth enterprises scheme disappears. Now we are taking more money under the theme of making more households come to the monetary sector. At what point, if this policy is wrong, should we be able to halt it and maybe change or reverse, other than facing the sector policy where it is directed to, other than wasting so much money? I don't know how much money we wasted under this restructuring program, laying off civil servants, and so on and so forth, and now we're re-recruiting. So I am concerned. I want to find out at what point should we pick up where things have gone wrong.
Thank you. Somebody joked that they think that PDM is per diem. Commissioner Seremba.
Thank you very much, MC. I'm Mark Seremba, Commissioner of Human Resource Management from Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. I just wanted to connect the speech from Honorable Minister, who said that maybe we need to connect the neoclassical theories and the modern theories to find a model for service delivery excellence. And I think Professor John Mary has brought it out clearly, where he said that the transformation model needs to work with the NPM model and then the bureaucratic model. So if we combine the elements, maybe we can have a model for service delivery excellence. I've been in service for quite some time, and I've seen reforms taking place, specifically from the 1990s to 2010. Along the way, we had a lot of policies being passed and laws being implemented. But in particular, I want to pick the public service laws, where I'm a practitioner. In between, as a result of the regulation of the service, we relaxed a bit on use of the public service standing orders. But again, in the middle of 2006, we had enactment of the Employment Act and the labor union, which allowed unionization in the service. So after that, then civil servants started taking government to court. And along the way, we lost most of the cases. So we had to go back to review the public service standing orders and align it with the Employment Act and the labor union. So, in other words, we went back to bureaucracy, combining it with new public management in order to move together.
Thank you.
Finally, I also wanted to comment on Professor Dr. Muhumuza, where he said, where the civil servants in humaneness and empathy, the civil servants are also asking where the think tanks in policy development and policy evaluation and what alternatives are they giving? Thank you.
Challenge the academia. Dr. Nwagaba.
Thank you very much. Professor Ageesigika. I want to comment on what Professor Kawuzi shared with us, Dr. Hajat and Dr. Mhumza. I strongly believe that for us to have good governance and improved service delivery, we should look at a number of aspects apart from what you've shared. And most people may not actually borrow a little thought from what I'm trying to say. But I believe that we should not neglect the element of the spiritual school of thought. Because from my personal experience, governance and ethics are very hard unless you have the fear of God. So you find that in public service, we emphasize so many other things, but the element of spirituality is neglected. I personally, there are some things I used to do because I didn't have the fear of God. But ever since I developed the fear of God, I no longer do those things.
Thank you. Thank you. You've made a point, and
thank you very much.
Yeah, Dr. Galkande.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kareja, Michael Galkande Chiganda. I am commenting on the presentation by Prof. Kauza and on the model he's proposing of political equity. Effectively, Prof. Kauza is putting very serious holes in the UNDP's model of good governance and the weaknesses that's caused when we are 7 years towards the year 2030. I would wish to speculatively comment on your model of political equity that you should expect 3 challenges. 1, so long as democracy remains the criteria of choice of public leaders and the numbers determine who shall be in political office, numbers shall always be challenged. So we have to look at another way of choosing who shall be entrusted with political leadership. Roadblock number 2 is on the quality of the participants. In Uganda here we have a universal model of participation. We have representatives of the lame, the disabled, the women, the youth, the aged, the uneducated. But we are looking at the quality of these participants. And the numbers, if the quality aspect is not included, it has not resulted into improved service delivery. Actually, we know that bigger numbers have never produced optimum governance results.
I'm sure you are taking us to the 3rd.
That is the 3rd.
Thank you so much.
That the numbers have not resulted into optimum results. So the universal political equity and participation needs to be checked critically before we recommend it to replace good governance.
Thank you. We are going to have Dr. Kugoza and then have brief responses, and then we shall have one more round.
Thank you very much, Gerard. My comment goes to our keynote speaker. And it relates to Obama's saying that we don't need strong men, we need strong institutions. And he made an attempt to amend it, but I have some difficulties with that. I also know that Professor Nguyen has said you'd rather kill people than kill institutions. And there is a tendency for strong people to compete with the space of institutions. I don't know what comment he has to add, given that strong men tend to compete with the growth and strength of institutions. Thank you.
Prof, you may make your observations known on the issues raised.
Thank you very much. So this is the problem I have faced throughout my career, that you cause yourself trouble by what you say. I think I'm glad that this feedback has come, because at least it shows that you have got an attentive audience throughout the 3 days. So I would want to thank them for that. Honorables were on that issue of policy, coming from a public leader, if I can call you that, is a very serious issue, and I'm going to answer it, but I wish every leader in Uganda was listening, because it is an issue. Now, let me first give you an academic answer, and then I will give you a practical one. The process of policy making does not begin and end. You don't make a policy and then stop. When you make a policy and stop, that means that policy is likely to go wrong, because circumstances in the process of implementation change, requiring that you revisit the policy and rearrange it to align with the new circumstances. So if, from a pure academic point of view, they were not wrong, those who present the process of policy making as a cycle, from initiating ideas to developing them into policy projects, to discussing the policies, to registering it, to implementing it, to monitoring it, evaluating it, and if the reveals the weaknesses you have pointed out, then starting on all over again. So the answer does not lie in stopping it and looking for another one. The answer lies in not letting go of the whole process, so that you catch it at it is about to go, and then you correct it. You don't wait for it to go wrong, and then you start saying, how do we correct it? Let's take an example of decentralization. You know, Uganda used to be an example of good decentralization. I ran all over Africa propagating the model of Uganda's decentralization. Now I can't do it, because I know the problems that were generated in the process. Nonetheless, if I was to be asked a question, if I was advising a country, I would say Uganda missed the point in the process of decentralization where it stopped the whole process of monitoring. You remember at one point we spent a number of years without holding elections for local councils. I was following it from New York, because it was an example I was using to advise countries, and then I saw it going wrong. I said, how can they not elect councillors? Because if they don't elect councillors, the ones who stay are working illegally. Really, from a purely legal point of view, if you are elected for 3 years, and after 3 years there are no elections, you are no longer there. If you continue working, you are working illegally. And smart people will know that you are working illegally and take advantage of that. And when I say smart people, they might be in decision making, they might be in budget. So eventually the whole process goes wrong. Goes wrong, not because the policy was wrong, but the process of implementation and monitoring was not followed through. By the time you realize that it has actually gone totally wrong, you can't stop some people who love it, and you can't continue with it because it is wrong, so you are in an impasse. Therefore, I think we should take the message I would deliver is, once you have made a policy, implement it. If you don't implement it, don't call it a policy. It's not a policy if it's not implemented. What is implemented is the policy. You know, sometimes you hear talk from government people that it is not government policy to do X, Y, Z. Then why is it being done? If it is done continuously, as the way I understand policy, that means it's a policy. On the other hand, if you plan to do it and you don't do it at all, don't come to me and say, no, we have a policy.
We have a policy on this. No, you don't have a policy because I don't see it in action. Policy is government decision in action. If it is government decision not implemented, that's not policy. That's why I was giving an example of I go to Gorobe and buy things and they put them in cafe. The plastic bags were banned. So consequently, it means it's not a policy. If it was a policy, it would be implemented. So the problem is around fulfilling the, and by the way, although we are using the Ugandan example, it's not a Ugandan example. Policy implementation is a big problem in Africa, and it has implications on development. First of all, we spend a lot of money developing these policies. Sometimes we hire expensive consultants and advisors to help us develop these policies, and after that, we don't implement them. But we have already paid them and they have gone. Then a few years down the road, we hire others, probably the same ones, to come and do another one. This is a messy thing, really. Those of you who have access to government people, they should not joke about the word policy. The word policy is the core of government. The fear of God. Okay, I was listening to you until you mentioned the word fear. I don't like working out of fear. That's my personal view. Then we can go into the details of it. And the details of it is like this. And I'm not going to say this to spite you, because that would not be me. I have developed, I have developed a tendency to suspect policymakers, leaders in the public space, in public governance, who frontline religion in their leadership. Because I have seen people do terrible things in the name of religion when they are holding public power. So if you can sort out that contradiction, then really I have no problem. Well, if you are religious and you do good things because you are religious, that's very good. But not fear, no. Acting out of fear, in most cases, you make mistakes. That's my experience. If you panic, it's like in boxing. If you go in a boxing ring and you start panicking, you can't win that fight. If you start fearing the person, I don't think, I hope by the word fear you could replace it with love. You love God, that's why you act the way you act. You love God's people, that's why you act the way you act. But if you say fear, my ears open wide, because I don't like acting out of fear. So I'm going to leave it to you to sort out the contradiction of what we see in public governance, who frontline religion and God and all this, while in practice, as they govern society, they literally finish society, take them in the wrong directions. Where are the think tanks? Good question. Isn't this a think tank? I think this is a think tank. I think there are so many economic thinkers in Uganda, and there are so many thinkers in Africa. And if governments wanted to borrow their knowledge and their skills and what they say, I don't think that's what is lacking. What is lacking is the listening capability of government. You know, governments which listen, which question, which engage, which are ready to say, okay, we know you are an expert in this, you think like this, but we were also thinking like this. What do you think? So that there is this engagement until they arrive at a specific policy. those ones move ahead, but I know that many governments don't listen. And when it comes to leadership, the lack of listening is developed in this way. When people move from where they are as common people, and then they get elected, or by whatever means they go up, they occupy positions, they mistake those positions for knowledge. Yeah, they mistake those positions for knowledge. So they think, okay, now I'm the executive director of this place, so who else can know more than I know? Which is a huge blunder. It is at that point that you should start learning, not really refuse to listen. Which links with political equity. Trust me, I have thought through this. If in a country the political space is not shared, it messes up decision making in all fields, and therefore messes up equity in all fields. You can play about with numbers, you can figure out how to make sure that the voices are on the table, but you cannot deny the influence of political dominance, the political separation. You cannot talk of economic equity and then you are talking of political separation. Because how can you be equitable to me if you don't want to listen to my needs? Are you sure what you are providing is what I need? In the first instance, you have to listen to me. And the process of listening to me is a political process. That's why I brought in this issue of political equity as a determinant. And it spreads. It can be those who talk economics, they want to listen to many people. Those who talk technology, they want to listen to many people. It's not a field that is limited to politics only. Thank you very much.
Dr. Gambuuze, do you have any comments to make?
Protest to add what Prof has said about think tanks. If it's a think tank and remains a think tank, then it's just like a tank. Tanks are just holding grounds. Until you put pipes and taps to engage where the action happens, then you'll not be in what Prof has rightly put it. Policy is government decision in action. The intellectuals must go where the action is happening. As I said, a teaching hospital must do outreach, must be out there where the patients are, even as they come in, and the policy cycles. Even the mortuary gives us very good information for medicine. So whatever has failed, can we review and bring it back on the wards? So teach, research, implement. I think that is what I am asking UMI to do. Don't just stamp and say these ones went through here. We need as intellectuals to get engaged in political spaces, decision making, but also in the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Nampeo.
Thank you very much for those questions. I don't have much to add to the issue of the policies, the need to review policies on a regular basis. Professor Kayuzia has extensively talked about it. But Honorable Ziwa, for some of the policies that may not be working, yes, there are others that are not working. For example, I was having a talk here with Dr. Muhumuza about the education service policy, which is now only being reviewed 30 years later. If you're talking about education and you're reviewing 30 years, you're 30 years too late. But there are policies that are not working in the public interest, but we must also ask the question, are there people for whom they are working? So for example, if the decentralization policy doesn't seem to be working, are there people who benefit by it not working, who actually want the status to remain? So of course, that's a conversation also that we need to take into context, that there may be policies that don't seem to be working for the public, but are working for a certain group of people, and that is the way that they need to remain for them. But of course, we need to talk about policy change and review. There is a policy in Parliament that needs to be worked on or revamped called the post-legislative scrutiny, where after sending out an act, you go back after 10 years and review and say, but this act that we drafted and adopted, is it working? So that is something that our parliamentarians need to think back. But of course, how do they know? We need a bottom-up agitation or declaration of interest from a group saying that this policy is not working so that they can be able to work on it. Very quickly, the gentleman who talked about the spirituality, he assigned to me a religious title. He called me Dr. Hajati. I think he presumed I'm very spiritual. My name is Nampio, not Hajati. I just wanted to say that when we are talking about spirituality, we must approach this with caution. I'm preparing a course that I do every year on human rights and governance in Africa. And I look at the International Corruption Survey that is done by Transparency International. And the one for 2021, which was done out of 180 countries, shows from the bottom up, South Sudan, Somalia, Sudan, Equatorial Guinea, Libya, and from the top, the most performing countries in terms of being corruption-free are countries like Denmark, in #1, Norway, Finland. These are very unreligious countries, if you want to talk about it that way. Not spiritual at all. But spirituality by itself cannot be that gauge to say that, we'll be able to produce or to deliver public services because we are spiritual. So we must also approach that with caution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are coming to a close. Sorry we couldn't have another round, but the conversations have begun and they will continue. And I just want to request that you accept our apology that we can't take in any, but Prof. Mubanjizi has persisted, I think, a minute, and then we shall come to a close. She's one of our theme directors and has been very...
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for indulging me. I wouldn't have insisted if I didn't think this was very important. And the reason I'm making this final comment is because the first plenary, by its very nature, sets the tone of the conference, and we will probably distill lots of issues during the breakaway rooms. And I thought that there are some issues on which we should shine the spotlight so that we don't lose them in the course of this, in the conference. The first one is in the context of inclusivity. Now, inclusivity is such a beautiful sounding name, but it is also one that is given different interpretations by different people, and in doing so, giving it different interpretations, it's actually possible to exclude people in the process. And I need to point out that it was not lost on me that in this first session, we never said anything about rural, we never said anything about gender. And yet in Uganda and in many African countries, the face of poverty is rural and it is female. And that face of poverty that is rural and female is actually being worsened by climate change. So those three concepts are very critical, that as we speak about governance and service delivery, we do not lose sight of gender, we do not lose sight of rurality and spatial differences, and we do not lose sight of climate change. The other is that of ethics. Professor Kayusia mentioned the importance of ethics in public service, but equally important, let's not forget the issue of ethics in the generation and dissemination of knowledge. So, for researchers here, axiology, very critical in epistemology, as we take the matter further in this conference, ethics in research. And lastly, and this is a challenge perhaps to the Central Organizing Committee, the issue that was raised by Dr. Fred Muhumuza, I think is challenging all public administrators, professors, and everybody within the realm of disseminating knowledge in that realm. professionalizing the public service. Very many countries have been talking about it. Some have managed to do it, but maybe it is something we need to take further as an organizing committee. How do we professionalize the public service? Thank you very much, Chair, for indulging me, and thank you very much to the good people before us.
Thank you very much, Prof. We couldn't have a better way to conclude that. And Prof. Mubanjizi is very passionate about those issues. She's currently holding the chair for rural and inclusive livelihoods. Thank you. May I request the MC to give us some administrative announcements? Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you, Professor Gerard, and thank you, the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going for break, a lunch break. We are having lunch from the very place that we moved to at break time for break tea, stroke coffee, for delegates. For the support team, security, service providers, and others, there will be a person to usher you to a place near the dining hall, this side. That's where you'll get your lunch from. The others is that my brother, Dr. Innocent, talks about the fear of God. We realize that when people are congregated like this, there are those who do not fear. They can pick anything that you either leave behind or you've forgotten. So take care of your properties, phones, iPads, and others that you think are of value. Move with them because the hearts are totally different. The other one is that in case you don't feel okay, we have the health service provider here. Kindly visit them. And there is a van here, there is a shed there. You can go and tell them, then they can advise you in terms of health service provision. The other one is about places of convenience. We keep announcing because anytime a person wants to visit, on floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, either side, on the side of the lifts, the ladies on the left, the gentlemen on the right. Floor 1, 2, 3, 4 is not operational. You may not have to visit there. Otherwise, we thank you for the patience and allow me to pray for this lunch. We can humble ourselves for prayer. Father, I want to thank you for this moment. We thank you for the conference proceedings so far, and we thank you for the good people that are here. And as we move to have lunch, Heavenly Father, may you bless the lunch. May it give us the energies to resume in the afternoon sessions. And may you always bless us in whatever we are doing. In Jesus Christ, we've prayed. We are coming back at, what's the time? I'm sure we can have lunch in 45 minutes. Trained people should eat in 10-15 minutes. If you ask here, my sister Naruoga will tell you that you can eat in 10 minutes. But for us, we are giving you 30 to 45 minutes. We should be here at around 2:30, 2:35 to start the afternoon sessions. And we beg that we observe time management. Thank you very much. The host can still lead. The chairperson of the governing council and members of council, you are the ones hosting us for lunch, and the director general. Thank you very much.